Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to yet another session on Conversations on Consciousness. And today we have a very special guest, Shri Jayakumar Ammangudi, from joining us from Coimbatore, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, and he's I know him for a few years now, and we have been talking to each other, discussing on various issues over the last few years. But before we begin the session and I'll introduce you to our guest, let me begin with a small prayer. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Shri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Parampara. Just to give a brief introduction to our guest today. Dr. Jayakumar Ammangudi studied Vedanta and Sanskrit for over 2 decades under Pujya Swamiji Dayananda Saraswati ji of Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. He has a B.Tech from IIT and a doctorate in chemical engineering. He has worked in chemical industry for many decades, and previously he was in the United States. He lived there for around 30 years, and apart from his professional work, he has also studied full time at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam, and he has been teaching Vedanta and Sanskrit in Coimbatore, and he is also very actively involved in the Seva activities and giving motivational talks to students, school teachers, and he's into a number of activities. He's founder of Indian History Awareness and Research USA, as well as Arsha Seva Kendram in Coimbatore. Very warm welcome to you, Jayakumarji, on behalf of all our audience and Advaita Academy. It's a pleasure to have you here today on our program.
Thank you, Nitinji. Thanks to Advaita Academy.
So, my first question is usually in this conversation on consciousness and other conversations, our first question is always the same. How did your spiritual journey begin? How did your interest in Vedanta happen? What were your earlier influences? Who were your gurus, teachers, who has influenced your life? So share us about your journey.
Sure. I had no exposure to Vedanta when I was growing up as a child. I went to college. I really did not know much about Sanatana Dharma. I was religious. I used to do my daily Sandhya Vandanam, etc. And then when I was doing my graduate studies at Purdue University, there I met a friend, and he was doing his postdoctoral work in chemistry, and so we just happened to strike a friendship. And then he used to say, Jayakumar, you must go to Swamiji's ashram. And it was a confusing advice for me because I don't know, I've never been to an ashram. I've never listened to any Swamijis or sannyasis. I don't know what they will talk about. Nothing I know. Why would I go to an ashram? Okay. So I said, okay, I will go to the ashram. This is what I said. He gave some books of Swamijis. And then the books were all sitting in my bookshelf for many years. And then 95, 96, I think it was. And so this last week, December last week, this big thing, Christmas vacation is a big thing. And of course, everywhere it's big these days. But so I had 1 week vacation. So what should I do? So then this friend came to my mind. He said, go to the ashram. So then I said, okay, why not go to the ashram? So I called them, and I was not sure what I was doing at all. I wasn't sure what I'm going to get. Why will I stay in an ashram for 1 week? Not 1 day or 2 days, 1 week. So I signed up for this camp. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I don't know how to spell Upanishad, okay? And so I flew from near Chicago. That's where I used to live at that time. Then I went to Pennsylvania, Salisbury. They had a beautiful ashram. So I signed up, etc., and sat in this class. And Swamiji had just landed from Coimbatore. He flies all the way to New York, and then he drives from New York 2.5 hours to this ashram. So he's come at 8 o'clock in the PM evening, let's say Sunday evening. And then he was sitting, about to give a satsang and about to address all of us. So he was sitting on the chair, and I happened to sit right next to him at his feet, near his feet, and all of us were surrounding him. And so I looked at just some small conversation. So I asked him, Swamiji, don't you have jet lag? This was my first conversation with Swamiji. Okay, apna buddhi mein, whatever we know, this is all we can do. And so I asked him. So Swamiji, he looked at me like this, because I'm sitting down, He looked at me like this, like only a father can look at an innocent child. And he said, I don't have time for jet lag. So I didn't know what that statement meant actually. It took me years to understand the meaning of that sentence. But that's how our conversation got started. But then that camp, it was about Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It was this dialogue between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. And some of our audience may know that. And so he talked about the basics, Purushartha, etc., and what a human being is seeking in life, and so on and so forth. So first time I heard about Purushartha, first time I heard somebody talking about Dharma and importance of Dharma, and etc., and Moksha. And so that whole week, Nitinji, I understood every sentence that he said. And so I went to the library, picked up some of his books, and I was reading in the intermission in between the classes. I used to read. And then when I went back home, I went to the bookstore. I ransacked the bookstore. I said, any name, Atma Bodha, anything which has the name Atma in it, get it. Get his audio tape. Those days, cassettes, audio cassettes, no MP3 and all. So audio boxes and boxes of audio cassettes. Some Upanishad, doesn't matter, get it. And then get. I filled up my car with all these boxes and books, and I went back to Chicago. Nitinji, this is how my life started.
This is very interesting. So very fascinating way of introduction to Vedanta. So what happened then? I must ask, what happened then?
Yeah, so then I was pretty serious. Whenever I used to put on those audio cassettes, whenever I used to travel to work, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I used to drive by car to office. So I used to play that audio cassettes, and I didn't know which one to start. What is a basic text? Nothing. I have no idea at all. So Upadesha Saram, listen. Okay, Kathopanishad, listen. Atma Bodha, listen. Mahabharata, listen. So I was just listening and listening and listening and listening. This is how the next few years was like that. Of course, every year I used to dedicate 1 week, and then I used to visit ashram at his ashram at Salisbury when he used to visit from India. He used to be in America for 3 months, and then rest of the time in India, etc. He used to come in summer, he used to come in winter, etc. So, and of course, Swami Tattvavedanandaji, you interviewed him several times. And so he used to be there. So I really got a lot of exposure from these giants, Vedanta giants.
That's wonderful, Jayakumar. So can you share any more anecdotes that you have with Swamiji?
Yeah, and so in this camp, see, I was also confused. I had a lot of conflicts, etc. I did not know how to express these conflicts. I never used to discuss about these things with anybody. I was never in any forums, this, that, nothing. And so Swamiji used to say things like this. In our culture, we don't just believe in God, we know God. He said this. I remember that. I said, my God, this is what I'm looking for. And then he would say things like, we don't have many gods. We don't have one God. We have only God. There is only God. In fact, this is the statement. There is not many gods. There is not one God. There is only God. And so that's it. These are the things that really got my mind thinking, and it felt like as though this is what I'm looking for. And so we used to, and then later on, I invited him to give a talk, etc. And then, so it was a nice journey after that.
So when did you decide to come back from US to India and take up Vedanta, leave the corporate career and take up Vedanta study and teaching in a more full-time manner? I mean, what led to that decision? What were you thinking, so to speak? I mean, what were going on in your mind? I mean, because it's a very big decision, to change from a purely a corporate profession, earning millions of rupees or dollars or whatever it is, to a complete life of kind of a teaching, learning, a satvika, a dispassionate way of life, so to speak.
Yeah, so this happened, this introduction was in 96. Then from Chicago, I moved to Houston, the company that I was working for. I was working for a very large company, $80 billion company. And they moved me to Houston. Houston is in the southern part of America. So it is in the state of Texas, which is north of Mexico. And so I moved to Houston. It's a large city. And by then I had already been studying. And so there is a temple there called Meenakshi Temple, which is like a miniature replica of the Madurai Meenakshi Temple. And so they used to conduct classes for children, and they used to use Swamiji's books on Vedic Heritage teaching program, it's called. And so I joined there, and they wanted me to teach some of the senior classes, the high school students and so forth. So I was very happy to do that. And then started my own organization there in Houston, so that we can dedicate ourselves to the study of the Shastram, and at the same time we can teach children and from in a different part of the town, and college students, young children, all that we used to do. So we used to conduct classes every Saturday and Sunday. I used to live in a small apartment, but then our friends had a good large house, so I used to basically move there on Saturday morning and return back home on Sunday evening. That's how the life was. And so we used to have all these classes. And then my interest to study Vedanta full-time increased. And I used to approach Swamiji several times about this topic. And he used to say, no, you're doing good work in Houston. You keep continuing. You have MP3 anyway. Listen to all these MP3 talks, Swamiji, and you don't have to come to India. So I said, okay. And then kept doing that. And then, of course, Swamiji gained Samadhi in 2015. But somehow in that year, so I kind of decided I had to come back. Something triggered it. And my parents were also getting older. And so they needed some help. So it was time for me to do something. And so all these things combined together, I decided to come back. And then I was visiting the ashram. One of the prime reasons for us to be in Coimbatore is that the Swamiji's ashram is here. And so that's why I moved my parents here in 2013 or so. So then a long-term course was going on in the ashram. And so there Swami Shankaranandaji was there. And Shankaranandaji, Swamiji and we were friends for many years. We at Brihadaranyaka Upanishad camp, Nitinji, and for me, it was the first time. And for Swami Shankaranandaji, it was the first time. And both of us sitting next to each other. And we were doing some seva and all that. We were packing vibhuti, kumkumam and all these things. And so here he is teaching in the ashram. He's teaching a 3.5-year course. So he tells me, Jayakumar, what are you doing in India? I said, no, Swami, I locked everything and gave up everything and distributed to Bhutanese refugees. And now I'm here. And I don't know what's going to happen. He said, if you have nothing to do, why don't you join this course? And I said, 1.5 years of the course already over. And in the middle of the course, no, you'll do well, come join. And then I went to my parents, I said, Amma, this is what they're telling me, should I go to the ashram? And my parents said, if not now, when? So I packed my bags that evening, and that evening itself I went to the ashram. And so that's how that journey started, Nitinji.
You have very interesting turnings in life. As much as you are interested in Vedanta, you have been involved in Sanskrit language promotion, teaching, and all. So, did Vedanta come first, or did the Sanskrit come first? How did your introduction to Sanskrit happen, and what attracted you to take up in a more serious manner?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Did Sanskrit come first or Vedanta come first? And so one thing is that I studied in a central school in Hyderabad, and there they used to teach Sanskrit for about 4 years. Fifth class to eighth class, I was exposed to Sanskrit. So Sanskrit grammar and all I knew. But then I had forgotten all of that. It was not a big part of my life. So Sanskrit was a past thing of the past. But when I started study under Swamiji, then of course Sanskrit became, he used to introduce all these Sanskrit words and explain and so forth. And so I became very interested. And so in 2000 itself, when I was studying by myself, I started Sanskrit classes. I attended a camp conducted by Samskrita Bharat. There was a notice, Nitinji. I saw a notice. It said, learn to speak Sanskritam in 1 week. I said, what? Never heard this before. Speak Sanskritam in 1 week? This is impossible. And so I said, let me attend this camp. So right there, and then every day in the evening, 7:30 to 9 or something, 1.5 hours. And so I used to, one day evening it started, I used to go to work, come back, quickly have something to eat, come back to this, go to this place. And Samskrita Bharati, our Vasuvaj Mahodaya was teaching. He started. And you know how these things work, Samskrita Bharati, the way they do it. So at the end of the week, we started speaking in Sanskritam, simple sentences, small stories and things like that. So then after that, I started conducting classes in my own apartment. So 6 or 7 of my friends used to visit me, and Thursday afternoons or Thursday evenings, we used to study Sanskritam. So it was, that's how that thing started. So I guess the short answer to your question is, yeah, I was exposed to Sanskrit, but Vedanta is triggered my full-time study of Sanskrit.
In the US, I think you were also involved with the Aim for Seva initiative of Swamiji, right? So can you tell us more about that Aim for Seva and what were your role in it?
Yeah. So in 99 or 2000, in the ashram, Swamiji had announced, I'm going to start an organization, a movement. I want it to become a movement. I want everybody to participate. Like that, he had announced. And somehow I had this, I've been interested in doing seva to the society, but never got an opportunity. I was more academic and college and degree and marks and this and that. That kind of mindset was there. But I looked at this as an opportunity, and so I was very eager to participate in that seva activities. And prior to that, I had sponsored an organization on a monthly basis when I was a student. And you won't believe it, I sponsored an organization called Christian Children's Fund. Okay, so an organization that's probably converting Hindus, right? So I was a part of that. So without knowing all these things, of course. And so then, of course, then Swamiji came to Houston in 2006, and then we started, our friends wanted me to invite Swamiji, and then we started fundraising campaigns for the organization. So our role in US was primarily to raise funds and then support the children's. Swamiji used to have a project called Chatralayas, means construct students, residence hostels in villages and so forth. Because Swamiji told us that when he was visiting villages, if one lady came and told Swamiji, Swamiji, you're doing so much, why don't you take our children away? They are getting spoiled in these villages. We don't want our children to be here. Okay, like that he had said. So he started this project, and so that's how it was started. And Houston chapter became pretty big, and within 8-9 years, we raised more than 2 crore rupees for Swamiji for this project. So all thanks to all the people who came together and really gave their heart and effort to Swamiji's movement.
That's wonderful. I have been reading about Aim for Seva for some time, and they have done an enormous work, so to speak. And I'm glad to know that you have been very part of it as well. So moving further, I think after you have come back to India, you have started an organization, Arsha Seva Kendram, right? You're currently also running it. Can you tell us more about its activities? Is it based on Seva, or is it more into teaching, or what are the activities you do it?
Yeah. So the primary activity of Arsha Seva Kendram is teaching, even though it's called Arsha Seva, and teaching Vedanta and teaching Samskritam and teaching our youth about their culture, building a strong identity for our children and youth so they can become, good leaders of this country. So that's the objective with which we started. And along the way, we also wanted to do Seva. So we are conducting coaching classes for underprivileged children in Mysuru. And we started with 15 children. Now there are 55 children. And now in the last 1.5 years, thanks to this pandemic, I shouldn't say thanks, but this whole online teaching became very big. And so many of my own past classmates and my students, etc., from various parts of the world, they're all conducting tuition classes for these children. And so every day from 3 o'clock till 9 o'clock in the night, these tuition classes are happening. And thanks to Advaita Academy, I mean, you guys have given us some licenses, and so we are effectively putting that to use. And so both teaching, primarily teaching of our Shastram, and then also encourage people to develop that attitude of Seva. Seva is so important, and we can't overemphasize the need for Seva. And Swamiji, kind of drilled that down to us. And so therefore it's a joy for us, and together we are running these activities.
Let me pick up a question from what you just said. Seva is very important. Often, I don't think a lot of people don't realize the importance of Seva or connection of Seva to spiritual pursuit, or especially the Vedantic pursuit. So, can you shed light, more light on this? What is the role of Seva in the Vedantic worldview, and how it helps one to, kind of perhaps Chitta Shuddhi, develop purification of the mind, and how it helps one to progress in the Vedantic path?
Sure. So even if you look at our own Shastram, Bhagavad-Gita or Upanishads and so forth, Upanishad doesn't talk much about Seva because it's an advanced tech where somebody already gained all the Chitta Shuddhi, Adhikaritvam is there, and that person, directly addressing that person about the truth of the self. But if you look at Bhagavad-Gita, talks a lot about Karma Yoga and Chitta Shuddhi. And so Krishna constantly tells Arjuna that you must do your duty. Like that he talks about. So in a life of a Vaidika, we've got this Pancha Mahayajna, Nitinji. And so for some of our readers, audience who may not be aware of it, Pancha Mahayajna is very important. And Yajna to our Pitris means our forefathers. And so especially when our parents have passed away, then we do offer the Yajna to them. And we consider them to be still around. And so in whatever form they are, we offer our obeisance, our prayers, and we seek their blessings. So Pitri Yajna, that is number one. So the next one is Manushya Yajna. Manushya Yajna is that community of human beings. And now and so Atiti Devo Baba and all, we have very powerful statements coming from the Taittiriya Upanishad. May you treat your guest as Bhagavan, Sakshat Bhagavan. And so that attitude is so important. And so you've got this Manushya Yajna, helping people. We can reinterpret that, helping people who need help. Okay, you don't have to go out of the way, but those who need help need to be helped. Then Bhuta Yajna is there. So that covers our animals, plants, our ecology, right? It covers all our water problems are there in India. Who's going to address that? Well, those days, every individual was involved in their own way. And so we have to be, each of us can be a part of the solution. And so there you've got the Bhuta Yajna. Then you've got Deva Yajna and Brahma Yajna. Brahma Yajna is the study of the Vedas. And so, Adhyanam Kuru. So every day we are supposed to do Swadhyaya Pravachanabhyanna Pramaditavya. So one has to keep the Vedas in mind and study the Vedas daily. That's what it says. And anyway, Shankara also says in Bhajagovindam, Kinchid Adita, Bhagavad-Gita, Kinchid Adita, correct? So every day, little bit Bhagavad-Gita you study, like that he says. And so that is Brahma Yajna. Deva Yajna means entire cosmos. We are not limiting ourselves to the health of the earth. Hey, the entire cosmos there, we are all interacting with everything in this cosmos. Nothing is isolated in this world. And so it is our responsibility to do that, to recognize that cosmos and then offer our yajna. That becomes the Deva Yajna. And so, what is the purpose of this? Again, coming back to Bhagavad-Gita, Karma Yoga, Chitta Shuddhi is there. And that Chitta Shuddhi is so important, especially in Advaita, it is important because it is talking about the knowledge of the self. And what is the prerequisite for this Advaita? Somebody says, how do you get this knowledge? In college, you got prerequisites. If to go to college, you must have an undergraduate degree. I mean, you must have a school degree. You must pass high school. Then only you can go to college. Then college, you've got first year, second year, third year. You've got to do some basic science courses before you go to the, your specialization, your field, etc. So there, this prerequisites are very clear. But what about the prerequisite for this Advaita Jnana? What is the prerequisite? And it's mind-boggling to me even now when I think about it. So there's adhikaritvam, viveka, vairagya, shamadamadi, mumukshutvam, they say. It doesn't say you must be old enough, you must be at least 50 years old in order to study Advaita. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say you must have some degrees. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say you must be male or female, nothing. It says you must have viveka. Viveka means the ability to see through things and ability to be able to see right from wrong to basics, dharma, right, wrong. Then of course, nitya and anitya vastu, all this it talks about. So how do you get all this? And so Pujya Swamiji would always say that Seva is a means for inner maturity, means for inner growth. And so we need to have a field in which we can express ourselves. And when Shastram is talking about you are the whole, you are the whole, how am I going to even appreciate this vision? It becomes a sentence in the textbook, right? You are the whole. Oh, I'm studying Advaita. No, I'm a great guy. So we know nothing about great guy and all that. You are the whole is a huge vision, and can I see myself as non-separate from the world? What a vision it is. What a vision it is. And for that, I must give. I must be more a giver than a taker. And the more I give, I can connect to the rest of the world and the rest of the cosmos. So I feel that Seva is a very important aspect in everybody's life, especially seeker's life. And especially India, being the history that we've had, history of Mughal invasions and colonization, we have developed, Nitinji, we have developed a scarcity mindset. Scarcity. So I have to hold, I have to save for the next few generations, and this mindset is there, and our forefathers did not have that kind of mindset. They used to give. And so I think even to neutralize that mindset, I think Seva is the best, it's the best way to do that.
Wonderful, Jayakumarji. I think you rightly identified that the long period of invasions and colonization has fundamentally changed our society. There was a time before this in a pre-colonial society wherein, in villages, many households, they used to feed the guests only, then have food. And it was a daily practices. So feeding the guests, feeding the sannyasins, feeding the beggars, feeding those who need it. But now we do not see it in an urban setting. That is almost impossible. And even all of us who are grown in an urban setting, we find the notion of Atithi, the one who comes without intimation. Basically, Atithi is not any guest, but one who comes without any intimation, he just drops in at your door. We are very uncomfortable with it, when we have been grown in this urban setting, and, we need to take an appointment. This applies to me, it applies to a lot of people. We don't feel comfortable with anybody simply dropping on the door, right? Except when they're family or friends, close friends or something. So there is a fundamental shift in our thinking, and there's a fundamental shift. One is the scarcity mindset that you mentioned, but also that there is a kind of a colonization has colonized our mind as well. So this needs to be rectified. So how do you see that going forward we can actually change this mindset? Especially, can you share some? Does Vedanta have some kind of feedback or some kind of methods or solutions to this current problem?
Yeah, so today, what is interesting is that even children are telling adults, no, you can't throw the plastic in the dustbin, in the trash can. Okay. Children are telling parents, and parents are wondering, what is this? No, plastic is damages the environment, and you can't do this, you have to recycle it. Okay, and the parents don't know what the child is talking about, and so now children are telling us what is the right thing to do. And because I mean, thankfully that idea has percolated into our schools. So I think the schools, etc., are picking up the thread, and they are educating children in the right way and creating awareness to the environmental problems that we have. Now, Vedanta per se doesn't talk about all this, because again, Vedanta is talking about the realities of life, especially the Jiveshwara Aikyam. So it doesn't have to talk about so many other things. Even this Karma Yoga really is not part of Vedanta, if you really think about it. And so because it assumes, so when Arjuna is asking the question, Shishyasteham Shadi Mam Tvam Prapannam, he says to Krishna. And so all these years, Arjuna has been his friend, and Arjuna and he is the brother-in-law of Krishna. So all these relationships are there. Finally, Arjuna is saying, no, I want you to be my teacher. You better teach me. So he has recognized a fundamental problem. And Krishna doesn't have to teach Arjuna that you must do your duty, even though there is a mention of doing the duty, you can't run away from this war is there. But really speaking, the person who's been dotting the I's and crossing the T's, which Arjuna was doing. And so Arjuna was ready for this knowledge, and he just needed a little nudge, and he was ready for this knowledge. And so Vedanta doesn't have to tell us, Pancha Mahayajna is there, and we have to recognize that we are not isolated. Look at the pandemic today. And somewhere in some countries, they say all this, what is it called? These animal, China, they're cutting all these animals and this and that. There's a name for this market. I forget what it's. So anyway, so look at all that. So that problem, they say, has caused this virus to spread, and things like that. So we have to be more and more sensitive. And we teach people to do this. And for example, for a simple thing, example I'll tell you, Nitinji. This Indian households, they have the habit of putting rangoli outside their house. Okay, all families will do it, whether they are religious, not religious, Vedic, everybody will do it. And so that used to be Bhuta Yajna. It used to be rice flour. And so you put the rice flour, and then even the ants would come and consume that flour. That's how it used to be. What happened over time, that rice flour got replaced by, gradually they added this stone powder, white stone powder. So they call it Moggu Mavu. In Andhra and Tamil Nadu, they used to call it like that. And Moggu Mavu means it's just pure stone powder. And yeah, they used to do that. And then I checked it out at home. What are you doing here? And then I checked it. It was all stone powder. So then 2 years ago, I made some calls. Now you can't get this powder. See, the rice flour that you put in your sambar in the kitchen, okay, and that is too fine. You can't do a rangoli with that fine powder. You need a slightly grainy, coarse rice flour. So I found out there is one store in Coimbatore, 2 or 3 stores, they sell that rice flour. And then I got packets of that, and I gave it to some of our people, neighbors, etc. And they enjoyed it. When I put that flour on the ground, believe it or not, ants started coming. I was actually very happy when that happened. Yeah. And we have to find another way to control ants. That's different. But, this trying to nuke all these animals, ants, spiders, everything, we just, spray all these things on everybody, that attitude, I think we have to go slow on that. We are not saying live in the midst of spiders, but let's think about all these things.
The concept of Pancha Mahayagya and the Pancha, the rinas that we have was one of the central to Sanatana Dharma, and most of us who are in an urban setting, we don't realize the importance of that, and we often violate them in our day-to-day life, and we don't realize the consequences of such a violations. But moving further, I want to ask a few questions related to some of the common misconceptions about Vedanta. One of the very basic misconception is that Vedanta is merely an intellectual gymnasium, and it's just one scholar debating with another scholar. They're all doing you know text torturing and such kind of things are there. And this also leads to another corollary that people draw from it is Vedanta is basically makes you lazy, you know makes you to kind of deny the life, deny the varieties of life, pleasures of life. So it makes you boring, it makes you lazy, it is against any it demotivates you from action. So these are some of the very common misconceptions prevalent, and this applies to even to some form of any spiritual pursuit as well. There is a common and understanding, at least some people think like that, uh, involving in oneself in sadhana and spirituality a little bit more than normal is bad in a material sense. So what are your comments on
Yeah, yeah, that is a popular misconception. So again, some of that comes back to that scarcity mindset. So you should not. Why are you studying? The parents will get upset if the college-going boy says, "I'm studying Bhagavad-Gita." Said, "What? This boy is studying Bhagavad-Gita? This guy is crazy." And we stop doing all this right now, okay? And so that's the advice parents will give children. And so that's a bit unfortunate. But so two aspects are there. One is Vedanta is all intellectual gymnastics and this and that. What is the use of Vedanta? That's one topic. The other topic is makes the Vedanta person lazy, etc., live in denial and so forth. So we'll address both. See, if you look at, okay, I give this example of a smartphone. Okay, we all have smartphones. And the smartphones are changing every 6 months. A new version is coming and it's getting more and more advanced. And those days, this Thomas J. Watson of IBM Labs in the 1950s or something, he said, IBM, founder of IBM, he was the president of IBM. He said, the world will need at most 5 computers. Okay, he makes a statement, very bold statement. Now, every human being has a computer in their hand. Okay, and nobody, even Thomas J. Watson could not predict that. And so these days, what is it that is driving the innovation in the cell phones? I ask people, is it plastic technology? Is it metal technology? Is it glass technology? Is it what? Chip technology. Okay. I spoke to my friend who works in an electronics company, Hewlett Packard. He works for Texas Instruments, I think. And so he works in this area. So I asked him, which part of your company, because they produce chips and they sell those chips to Intel and so forth. What are the people, which department in your company really is contributing to this modern technology that consumer like us looks at? He says the physicists. He says the people, the quantum chemists, the quantum physicists and quantum chemists. What they are doing is they have come to a point where they are placing atoms. Okay, they're placing atoms and they're playing with the arrangement of one atom at a time. Okay, now so if somebody says, I want to study physics, I want to study quantum physics, people will ask, what job will you get when you study quantum physics? I want you to study some chemical engineer, mechanical engineering, computer science. That is that you will get a good career. Now, these fellows, these physicists are working on this technology, okay? They are the ones that are creating this kind of rapid progress in these phones and cell phone technology and so forth. Can anybody imagine that a person who's playing with atoms is contributing to our cell phone technology? We can't imagine this, Nitinji. We can't really imagine. We don't know what's going on. And so why I said all this is, the guy who's thinking about at the level of the particle, trying to find out what is the truth of the particle and what is a quark, what is a positron. Those days when I was in school, I was taught that the fundamental particle was electron, proton, neutron. But now they've gone, 40 years later, they're talking about all kinds of things and quarks are there and so on and so forth. So they are in search of the truth. Like that, we are also in search of the same truth only. because truth is only one. So we are in search of the truth. And so to say that Vedanta is gymnastics is wrong, because then the physicist also is doing gymnastics. No, he's not doing gymnastics. That person is pretty serious. And the physicist may not care whether his invention is being used in the cell phone or not, because that person is doing it for the love of it, right? Most likely. And so, but same thing here. The pursuit of truth is like that. It may appear to a layperson as gymnastics. It may appear to the layperson as some technical terms they're using, Maya and Karma and this and that, and this Karana Shariram and Sukshma Shariram and this and that. But this is why generally the Vedanta is not taught to anybody. No subject is not taught to anybody, right? So before we sign up for a course, we have to prove that we have the prerequisites. And so one of the problems is that these days Vedanta is available for anybody to study. And so if a person who in public talks, Swamiji used to tell us, I'm careful when I talk in public. He used to say, why? Because in public, you don't know who is attending. And a person who has no background can come. A person who's been studying Vedanta for many years also can come, right? And so the speaker has to address both audiences. So they have to be very careful. And so sometimes that lack of preparedness will make us say things like that it's mental gymnastics, etc. But Vedantins know that is not true. And the second part of your question is about this living in denial and becoming lazy, and you mentioned some of those points, Nitinji. And so again, that may come from a lack of understanding of what Vedanta is. What is the end goal? What is the purpose of Vedanta? Is it a means or an end? What is the human? What are the Purusharthas? All that must be clear. And sometimes I think, this Amar Chitra Katha, I think all of your audience will remember Amar Chitra Katha. We used to enjoy reading that, and as children. And in fact, a lot of things we know are from Amar Chitra Katha, thanks to Anant Pai. And so one thing there in those books, the minute somebody got enlightened, then the only thing you see is beard, long beard, and that fellow is just sitting and meditating. This is how they presented it. So as a child, this is how it's there in the mind. So moksha means gone. That's it. Moksha means don't go near him. And if you touch this fellow, then he will throw a shapa, curse. And so not only don't go near him, don't even have anything to do with him. They will curse you. These are all angry. Our rishis are all very angry. This is the mindset we all have got. And so that's why you get these ideas. But definitely, even if you study the Bhagavad-Gita, in the 3rd chapter, I think Krishna talks about karmanaiva hi samsiddhim astita janakadaya loka sangraham evapi sampashyan kartum arhasi. So he's talking, hey Arjuna, if you think you are a wise person, then also you must do your duty. Janaka was a wise man, the father of Sita, assuming that's the Janaka Krishna was mentioning. Janaka was a wise person, and he did his duty as whatever a king should do, he did. And so he had no choice, because the ashrama, he's in the Grahastha ashrama, and he's a Kshatriya, and so he has to do his duty. It doesn't matter whether you're so-called enlightened or not enlightened. And like this, Krishna tells, if you're not like that, then what? Then also, karmanya vadikaraste mate sangostva karmani. Mate sangaha astu akarmani. What a clause Krishna puts there. Hey, you have the right to do your actions, and you don't have the right on the results. But just because you can't control the results of your actions, don't lose interest in doing your duty. Is it not? You've got to do your duty. Mate sangaha astu akarmani. In actionless, in passive, do not be passive. That is what Krishna cautions us. And so anybody who teaches this will make it a point to communicate that. And Pujya Swamiji was one of the, for us, a great role model, because he used to be so active, Nitinji. People used to come from all quarters and ask him for advice, and he used to go along with him. Then yes, you should do it. Yes, if you need any help, let me know. And go do it. You want to clean the temple? Yeah, go do it. You want to set up the school? Yes, go do it. He will never say, come and study with me. Never say, because he goes along with this, with the person. Look at that, because the person has to mature, and only by doing what is to be done they mature. And even Krishna says, if you look at the Bhagavad-Gita, Name Parthasti Kartavya. Trishu Lokeshu Kinchana. He says, Arjuna, I don't have any more duties to do. Okay, I have nothing to do in these three worlds, he says. And then Yadi Hyaham na Varteyam Jatu Karmanya Tandritaha, etc. Utsideyu Rime Loka. He says, even if I don't do what I am supposed to do, then I will confuse people. Correct? Sankarasya Karta. I will create cause, I will create confusion in society, and I will destroy people's minds. Krishna is talking about himself. The avatar is saying, I have come here for a purpose, I must do what is to be done. So Nitinji, this idea that this Vedantin can get away simply sitting and doing nothing, etc. Now, the person may choose not to do anything. That's a different matter altogether. But when the person advises others, they will never say, they will advise people. All our sannyasi that I've met, they used to always advise us to do whatever you do it properly, taking care of parents, taking care of your children. All these are important dharmas. Taking care of the society is important. So do. This is what they used to teach us. And so I think that there are, I hope that helps somewhat put your question in context.
Thank you, Jayakumar. It certainly helps. We are almost coming to the end of the session, so I have one or two more questions. Another misconception is regarding the notion of moksha. Yes, in general, it is defined, irrespective of the sampradayas and all. The general definition is transcending this cycle of karmic cycle of birth and death. But we have a more technical definition in Vedanta as Jivatma Aikyam, Jiva Brahma Aikyam and all. So, but the kind of Aikyam or the union is something that people have difficult to negotiate with. So, especially the famous statement attributed to Shankara is that Brahma Satyam Jagat Nityam, Jiva Brahmaiva Na Paraha. So it has led to a lot of misunderstanding of what is moksha according to Vedanta. Can you shed some light on this?
Yeah. So this statement, Jiveshwara Aikyam Aham Brahmasmi Ityadi, it has to be obviously carefully explained. Tattvamasi. So you are that. So you are that means what? You are the world, you are Ishvara. Means how does one understand that? And so you means I am this little small body. I'm sitting in a small room, in a small house, in a large city, in a large state, in a very large country, in a very large world, and which is, they say it is a speck in the whole cosmos, and there are many galaxies. And how can that speck be this Ishvara, Sarvajnaha, Sarva Shaktiman, etc.? How is it possible? It's impossible. It's not possible. So that is why this idea of Satyam and Mithya becomes so important. And so, this example of pot is always given. And for those in your audience who may not fully understand this idea of Satyam and Mithya, and the example of the pot is given. And say, so this is a pot. You just imagine a pot, a clay pot. And so that pot is there. Now, pot exists. Then the question is asked, what about the material of which the pot is made? And the material is clay. So now tell me, what is this? Is it clay or is it pot? You can't say it is both pot and clay. If you say it is pot and clay, are those two words synonyms or what? Synonym means clay means pot means clay. Is that correct? No, that's not correct. They are not synonyms. They are entirely two different words. And so the weight of the pot is the weight of the clay. The color of the pot is the color of the clay. And the touch of the pot is the touch of the clay. So all the attributes that the pot claims is all given by the clay. And so clay is the satyam of the pot. Pot is just a nama rupa. And like that the discussion starts. And so then we say pot is mithya. Mithya is that which depends on something else for its existence. And Satyam is Adhisthana Ananyatva. So Satyam is, Satyam is that which exists by itself. Doesn't depend on anything else for its existence. So then you have to come down all the way to that which exists by itself. Then what is it that exists by itself? Then the question of who are you comes. Who are you? Do you exist or not? Do you exist or not? Then we have to scratch our head, do I exist or not? And no, I'll ask Swamiji would say, if you ask something, no, I'll ask my husband and tell you. Or I'll ask my wife and tell you. Hey, do you exist or not? You can can you tell it for yourself? And so the answer is yes, I exist. And how do you know you exist? I don't know, I exist. And I don't need my eyes to see my body and then tell me, yeah, I exist. I don't need to hear my voice to figure out that I exist. Nothing. I exist is always there. So, Nitinji, there is a lot of teaching involved here, Satyam and Mithya. And that is why, the proper teaching, I've been to many sannyasis, many swamis, and I found that some of these basics, that this moksha, another point, Nitinji, is moksha is a siddha vastu, siddha vishaya. Means it is already gained, but I don't know my true nature, and therefore I go out seeking, and that seeking has no end. Therefore, we talk about karma, rebirth, etc. And so this goes on. And so unless we know ourselves, I think we are the only culture which talks about this, who am I? I don't see this anywhere else. And so that Siddha Vishya has to be properly explained, I think. And, in our school days, I don't know if you remember, we heard a story of Kuchu and his glasses. This is what I heard. And this guy called Kuchu, and he was reading his newspaper in the morning. All these people, our Indian parents used to, without the newspaper and coffee, they can't, the day doesn't start. They used to read the newspaper. And then somebody knocked on the door. And then he went and then engaged with that person and came back. And then wanted to study the newspaper, and he can't find his glasses. Can't find his glasses, so he's looking around, he can't find it. Until somebody tells him that, you know what, you have the glasses. What you're looking for is really on your own head. If you have it, you are looking for what? You're looking for something. And that is based on an assumption that I don't have that something. And that once that assumption is wrong, this search is never going to be complete. And so some shastram has to come as a pramanam and say, wait a minute, it's a mirror. That's why I said darpanam. Vedas is like a darpanam. All it does is shows you who you are. It doesn't create anything new. Knowledge is not created. And so there is this very beautiful Nitinji. And I think if it is taught well also, I think that makes the whole journey also very fascinating. And all this anxiety that we have about this Vedanta being that, and I don't follow this, all that I think it will go away once that, like teachers like Swamiji that we were in the midst of. That's what I learned from Pujya Swamiji, Swami Tattvavidanandaji, and other great giants.
Wonderful. That story about the spectacles reminds me of the more common Vedantic story of the finding the 10th man. The 10 people cross the river, and when they count whether all have crossed it, they don't count themselves. So always they come to the counting of 9, and they are searching who is missing. It reminds me of the story. Jayakumar ji, you at the beginning you shared about how your introduction to the textual tradition happened. A little bit here, a little bit there, and a little bit from everywhere. So, if I were to ask you, what would be your advice to new seekers about how should they go in textual study? Would you suggest such an approach to others, or would you suggest a more systematic approach to them?
Yeah. So now I was taught by Swamiji. So I went with Swamiji's teaching. So I did not ask Swamiji, what should I study next and things like that, because I didn't know what I should ask. So that was my problem. And but the key here is, Nitinji, is to learn from somebody. And the idea that somehow I'm going to pick up a book and then begin to study Bhagavad-Gita, generally it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because there are so many misconceptions you already pointed out, so many ways in which I can misunderstand. There are more ways to misunderstand than there are ways to understand. Okay. And so we have to be very cautious here. And so advising on what a text is to me, the approach should be, I'm reminded of Swami Tattvavidanandaji. There was a satsang, Nitinji, and in the satsang, there was a question. We generally write questions in a piece of paper and give it to Swamiji. And then the Swamiji reads all the questions one by one and answers the question. One of the questions was, Swamiji, what is the secret of your success? Okay. Can you imagine in India, somebody going to Swamiji and asking this question? I don't think so. We won't ask this question.
No.
We won't ask this question. In America, culture is a little different. People are freer, etc. And so now Swamiji read this and he started laughing. Swami Tattvavidanandaji, serious man, okay? And we considered him to be a walking encyclopedia, okay? And so he was asked this question, he started laughing. But then he gave an answer. I remember. He said, you try to be in the midst of Mahatmas. Seek out Mahatmas in your community and try to find a way to spend time with them. That means go to the ashram, study something and do some seva to Mahatmas, observe them, see the way they interact with each other, see the way they talk, things like that. And so that was one of the answers he gave. And so I think we should also remind our audience that in this day and age where there is everything is online, and the tendency may be, I can sit at home and become an expert in Vedanta. That feeling may come, and it's fine, good. If you can study Vedanta at home through online, that's great. And in a sense, you're making use of the time. And Swami Sadatmanandaji, I think you know him also, Nitinji, and you've interviewed him in the past. And he used to tell, when I used to tell him, Swamiji, my classes are going on and I've started Bhagavad-Gita classes. He used to say, oh, so you're giving e-moksha to everybody or what? Like that he used to do. E-moksha, okay. So Swamiji, we don't have much choice. So he used to bless all of us. And so I think that point is to be noted, that we want an Acharya who can guide us. And at the same time, another misconception is we often say that this is a philosophy. We often say Advaita philosophy. So philosophy in the Western sense is a subject. It's a subject like anything else, like English or chemistry or mathematics or engineering. Philosophy is another subject. You can study philosophy. You don't have to study philosophy. But in our culture, it's not like that. Whatever sampradaya we are part of, and whatever, whether it is Advaita or Vishishta Advaita or Advaita, for us it is life or death. And we live with it and we die with it. And so this Telugu Kriti I am reminded of. Telisite mokshamu teliyakunna bandham. Telisite mokshamu, Nitinji. If you know, you got moksha. If you don't know, teliyakunna bandhamu, then you are bound, he says. Can you believe these things? Our Tyagaraja and Dishitar and Purandaradasa and all wrote so many kritis. They are reminding us constantly about this. So I think that is another advice, if at all I can say that. And also, in terms of a book, Bhagavad-Gita is probably a good text for all of us to study because it has a lot more elaboration. If in case we are not prepared for Vedanta, then the teacher will have the flexibility to highlight or elaborate some of the basics. And if I don't know what Maha-Yajna is, I can talk. If I don't know what Karma Yoga is or Bhakti Yoga is, then that Bhagavad-Gita allows the teacher that flexibility. So that is something I think we can tell our audience. And Swamiji always used to tell us, the message he used to convey is, take care of yourself. Often we have this anxiety, to study Vedanta and this and that. I must study. Yeah, you must study. That's good. That's a good desire to have study. But also take care of yourself, he used to say. Do your things properly. Make sure your family is comfortable. Make sure they don't think you are running away. And if they think you are running away, that means what kind of Vedanta that is, right? So that is also important. I think that we Vedanta should help us. It should not be a burden to anybody. It should not be a burden to the family or the society. So that's the way I see it. It's not a burden at all. It really frees us up. And because it freed me to a large extent, I was able to do whatever I'm doing. And so I think that's the vision with which we should approach Vedanta.
Thank you, Jayakumarji. That's a wonderful piece of advice. A lot of people today has a journey something like that. Uh, they start somewhere. I mean, something triggers something they don't know how to go, and I think that is a story with most of us. I remember my own journey was something like that, reading a little bit from here, from there, from everywhere. So this kind of, the need for a guru and all that, that people don't realize, or nobody is there to tell them that. So we need to keep repeating that. So that will be very helpful. So with this, we come to a conclusion of yet another session of conversations on consciousness. It was a very fascinating session. On the behalf of entire Advaita Academy and all our audience, I thank you, Jayakumarji, for agreeing for the session, for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Nitinji. Thanks to you. Thanks to Advaita Academy for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you. All the best to you also.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayakumarji. Viewers, with this we conclude. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and we have a Facebook group. Join that for discussion as well, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.